The challenge is that everybody overnight has become an AI expert.
Chris Hood is an AI keynote speaker, strategist, and author, recognized as a top leader in an AI-driven customer experience. With over 20 years pioneering enterprise AI initiatives, he has authored Infallible and Customer Transformation, and was named a top 30 customer experience thought leaders by global gurus in 2024 and 25.
There is no such thing as autonomy in AI, and yet it's an overly marketed, overly hyped concept that everybody talks about.
His career includes AI strategy at Google Cloud, deploying production AI models, and developing innovative AI recommendation systems at Fox, Disney, and Domino's. Currently, Chris advises Fortune 500 companies on AI transformation and intelligent CX platforms.
AI engineers are getting salaries around $500,000, $600,000 annually for US, and there are poaching happening for data scientists with salaries up to several $1,000,000 annually.
He also teaches AI ethics and business strategy at Southern New Hampshire University. In today's episode, we show you how to draw a line between hype and practical implementations, when and if you should actually implement AI solutions in your life or business, the AI ethics conversation that we should have today, and how to choose a career in this space if that's something you're contemplating. Hey, before we dive in, I'm your host, Gabe Marusca, and I want to quickly ask you a small favor. If you enjoyed this conversation and find it valuable, please hit that subscribe button. It helps the podcast grow and bring on more amazing guests like Chris. Thank you so much for tuning in and enjoy the episode. Chris, welcome to Authority in the Wild.
Thanks so much.
I'm super excited because we're about to talk about AI, which is a bit hyped topic nowadays, or at least for the last couple of years. And I'd like to ask you, what advice you see out there in the wild about AI that makes you roll your eyes?
Most of it. There's a pretty wide gap between hype and reality. And it's sometimes it's a little frustrating, sometimes it's comical. But one advice that I typically share with a lot of people is you've got to do your own research. You've got to take everything that you're reading on social media with a grain of salt and go off and try to figure out what is actual real. And the problem with that is it's just flooded. We are flooded on a daily basis, bombarded with information. The term fake news that used to be around, that's more so now than ever before when we talk about artificial intelligence. And the additional challenge is that everybody overnight has become an AI expert because they're claiming that they have expertise in this space after only a couple of months. You usually find that it becomes even more challenging to distinguish fact from fiction.
Yeah, definitely agree with you because I stumble upon this as well a lot of times, like either by trying to get help from others with AI or me searching for some tools or researching something. Like every new tool, they market it as they are on the market for like years, or every expert, it's I don't know how many years of experience they have in the space and so on. And there are just few like you that they are truly in the space for decades and they can literally say that they are experts in it. But how ourselves, like mortals, can separate from these gurus, let's say, that pretend to be experts in AI and true experts that can actually help us?
Yeah. What's becoming increasingly more challenging in that is when you do a search, like let's say you do a typical search on Google for information. Well, now at the top of Google search is AI that is outputting information that it's been trained on by overly hyped marketing campaigns. So if you can imagine, let's just use something far fetched to kind of paint the picture. If I say I have invented time travel and I start to market the first ever time travel machine, well, Google will start to track that and then it will eventually respond with, yes, time travel has been invented by Chris Hood and this is how it's done. And so when our marketing and misinformation gets incorporated into the AI training, and the output is of misinformation, now it becomes even harder to determine what is real and what is not. And so, for people out there who are trying to figure this out, you are going to have to try to find people to follow that have different perspectives. So just because you've read a report, say by McKinsey, that suggests that there is some new type of organizational structure around AI agents, go and find somebody else that says the complete opposite, and then begin to compare and contrast those two messages and really do your due diligence on, okay, is this marketing language or is there some factual elements that I can consider? The only way you're going to get to a valid truth today is to actually listen to diverse perspectives on the topic and then make those decisions yourself. And hopefully, between those different viewpoints, someone is bringing a sense of reality back to that conversation so that you can distinguish from hype versus reality.
And we should look at certain trust factors when we do that, when comparing those perspectives.
Well, yeah, you can look at data, but even like stats or data points can be misleading. So, as an example, MIT came out a little while ago that said, and everybody is talking about this, like 95% of company AI pilots fail. Well, on one side, if you dive deeper into that stat, into that study, you find that there are a lot of people that they didn't actually talk to, that the subset of data points is very small, which then raises some flags. If you're reading just the title, 95% of AI pilots fail, well, that sounds like a big number, but not if you're only looking at 100 different projects, right? And then on top of that, you have to also start to ask potentially, why did these pilots fail? A lot of people argue, well, they implemented them wrong or they didn't know what they were doing. I've argued that in that report, one of the areas that they don't actually investigate is a misalignment of understanding of the capabilities. And so, if I believe that AI is going to do a certain thing for me, but in reality, that is not an accurate thing that it can do, well, then the pilot's going to fail because I don't have an agreed upon understanding of capabilities. And in my research, one of the things that I found was that when you actually start to ask people about the capabilities of artificial intelligence and compare that to reality, there's about a 7-year gap between what we can actually do today and what they believe AI is capable of doing. And a lot of what's fueling that gap is either misinformation that is out there fueled by marketing or simply watching movies. When our basic understanding of the capabilities of artificial intelligence come from like Terminator or other sci fi movies, Star Trek, well, then we have a misalignment. And that misalignment, where I believe AI can do something that it can't, ultimately leads to a failed pilot or a failed project. And this is the type of research that individuals have to do. They've got to dive deeper into it, not just read the headlines, look at the stats, get deeper into those stats, and then start asking really philosophical or really challenging questions like, what other reasons could this be the case? And if you can do all of that, then I do think that you can get a little closer to better understanding what's going on out there.
And it's so interesting when you mention like 7 years gap. And indeed, if you look like the movies that you mentioned, or Minority Report, or others that kind of give us a sense of what's possible, sometimes now living moments that we saw few years back in movies and such can even increase that sense of, oh, this is actually real what this marketing campaign is pushing out there or so on, but in reality might not be. And I think this is especially true when it comes to the fear of missing out. Like most businesses that want to implement AI in their workflows, in their operations, and based on this hype, they feel like they are left behind. That's truly the case, or how should businesses approach AI integration?
It absolutely is the case. And I wrote an article a couple of weeks ago called Agent Washing, similar to what you might call whitewashing, or the concept being that we're tapping on the agent label to anything and everything just so that we can appear relevant. So organizations and that fear of missing out believe that, well, if we do not jump onto the AI bandwagon, then they're going to go to our competitors. So we're going to have to come out and say that we're just as much AI as our competitors, as everyone else. But the only way to do that is to take existing products that they've had for 5, 10, 15 years and then now claim that, well, these are AI agents or these are AI components. It's really funny because I've argued, like, even from a Microsoft perspective, if you look at like Microsoft Excel has had macros and calculation logic in the system for 30 years, but now they're calling it AI. And really, there's no difference between having the basic macros versus an automation system that you're going to say is AI based. And this kind of agent washing is happening everywhere because of that fear of missing out. We have to stay relevant. We also see this in a few other areas where we have companies. And most recently, like Duolingo did this. I think it was I want to say Slack, but maybe it wasn't Slack. And then most recently, one of the home websites came out, and basically it was a leaked memo by one of their CTOs or CEOs or something, and saying that the framing is, from this moment forward, everything we do needs to be focused on AI, as if it's some big revelation and mission statement that they've produced. And in every single one of those scenarios, all of those companies have already been using AI, have already exposed AI, have already have website and blog postings talking about their AI integrations from 5 years ago. And you have to ask, why are you making these announcements today? And really, the only answer becomes to be relevant, to show that you are doing something in the AI space, even though you may have been already doing it for the last 5 years.
And in that situation, when all the big boys are doing, what should, for example, a small business do in that situation, or an individual, or like a solopreneur? Since if they, let's say, don't display, I don't know, AI driven solutions or whatever on their websites or in their content, those that are searching for services, they might ignore them, or
Yeah, there's some simple answers to this. And the first one is that most of your customers could care less. If we think about there's this old term called, how the sausage is made. I don't know if you've ever heard that, the sausage factory. The basic premise is that I want to eat my sausage. I don't need to know how it was made, right? And in a lot of cases, that's true. Customers want you to solve their problems. They want your product, but they really do not care what's happening on the back end, behind the scenes, or how it's made. Right now, I'm looking at you and you have a pair of headphones on, and it's a great looking pair of headphones. Have you ever thought about how those headphones are made? Or are you simply saying, I'm glad they work, right? They're comfortable. I can hear sounds well. And that's kind of the process we're going through right now with artificial intelligence. Consumers are actually frustrated by AI being imposed on them on a regular basis, and they ultimately don't care about it. They want to have their problems, the services, the brands that they're familiar with, and engage with them. And so you have companies now like, say, Taco Bell that has implemented AI through their drive-throughs. Well, there's problems with that. And then consumers going through the drive-through don't like it. And now Taco Bell's revenues are declining because they're losing business due to AI implementation. All I want is a taco. And so if you kind of reset this and think through it, companies have to maintain solving customer problems. That's it. That's how businesses operate. That's how they've always operated. The technology will always change. In 5, 6, 7 years from now, we will not be talking about AI anymore. We'll be talking about whatever the next technology is. And to demonstrate this, in your podcast, when was the last podcast that you had where you had a guest come on and started talking about website development or building mobile phone apps or what the latest mobile phone technology is? Maybe that's more relevant, but we're not talking about these technologies, whereas 10 years ago, 20 years ago, all we were talking about was mobile phones. And so we have to remember that technology is constantly evolving, but the consumer, the end user, the person who is going to be purchasing your product, you have to solve that consumer's problem, their needs. And if you do that, then it doesn't matter what the technology is or will be, you will be successful.
That's a breath of fresh air because indeed in this world where hype is so loud in the AI space, to hear that as a small business or as a sole operator, you don't have to push for this technology just for the sake of it if it doesn't help you solve your client problems and maybe your business problems. And for those that are actually in need of that, they feel like they can leverage this technology in order to, I don't know, either increase their output or solve client problems in a better way. How they should approach without having to go on that path that Taco Bell went and actually losing customers.
Yeah. You still have to start off with what's the problem you're solving. So I always use a basic framework. You start with the customer. What's the problem that the customer has? What are you trying to solve? As you were asking the question, as an example, maybe there's some sort of efficiency that we can gain. How do you know that that's an efficiency you need to gain? Have you asked the customer? Like, have you polled the customer and have they told you that this particular process is slow? If so, then great, you've got a candidate. So we'll just say, okay, customer is going through the checkout process and it's slow, and we want to improve that. Great. Okay, we've got a customer problem we want to solve. Then you say, now how could I potentially solve this problem? And in most cases, you can solve it with other technology that's nothing to do with AI. Going through this process, we say the checkout process is slow, so we need to improve the efficiency. Well, maybe we need to speed up our internet connection. Maybe we need faster servers. AI is not going to solve that problem. And so, again, when we have these kind of going backwards, when we start with the technology, when we say, well, I want to use AI, and now let's go figure out how we can use AI. And then let's hope that the customers appreciate the fact that we've used that AI. That's a completely backwards mindset. I've talked with a lot of different people, and they've told me, well, look, we've implemented AI as more than a chatbot, but it's like an onboarding system, and it really helps us streamline our entire process. And customers can get information faster. I said, how are customers getting that information faster? And they explain it. Well, they can use this AI tool and they can ask a question and it brings back the information. And so I respond and well, so you built a search engine? And they're like, no, no, it's AI. No, you've built a search engine, which you could have probably saved yourself a couple $100,000 by just focusing on a search engine because you have customers asking questions, revealing answers, right? And I think, again, this goes back to your point when there is so much fear and demand and hype to use a technology, then we are trying to find ways to use the technology as opposed to figuring out what the problem is and then figuring out what the right technology is to solve that customer problem.
I love the fact that you start with the customer because often is the unsexy part of business and marketing and so on. Because understanding your customer, it's hard. You have to have those tough conversation. You have to put a hand on the phone and make those calls and have those discussions in order to get those insights. But without those insights, it's very hard to actually identify what exactly they need help with, what process needs to be sped up, and so on. And can you give me, please, examples of practical situation in which people actually implemented AI in a way that truly helps without, I don't know, investing probably hundreds of thousands of US dollars?
Yeah, it's interesting because we were just talking about how do you get better insights about your customer? We have to pick up the phone, we have to call them. And yet, a lot of organizations have some of this information already available to them. You might have a support system. So, people, even if you are a small business, you've got some mechanism for people to say, I need some help or I've got a problem, whether that's online in some fashion or whether you do have a support or call center where people can call in. All of those dialogues, all of those messages, emails, even people are emailing you with questions. They want to better understand what's going on. In the phone systems, we have now what's called sentiment analysis. And it's basically AI that can listen to people's voices and begin to try to identify emotional cues like, are they frustrated? Are they happy? Was it a good experience or a bad experience? And so all of this data can actually provide you better insights about what your customers are looking for. Larger organizations have programs called Voice of the Customer, which means that they're actually sitting down and having these conversations with their customers. And you're able to then track that dialogue. And you can input all of this into an AI system and then you can find ways to strategically output what these insights are. I was talking with somebody just a couple of days ago, actually, and they've built a similar type of system and they've applied it to their sales team. So now, if their sales team is going in to talk with a customer or a prospect and they have a specific question, the sales team can do some research about what all of their customers in the past have either said or felt or thought about or complained about, and then come up with solutions, strategic solutions that they can present to the new customers in a more compelling way. And it's a great example of how now you can use the AI to analyze the data and you can output that data in different formats for different teams so that you can better understand the core problem, which is from your customer's perspective. And so instead of you being the one to call up everybody and sit down and jot notes and figure that out, start using all of the actual data and information you already have to help you look at that. One more thing in there is you can also start to leverage AI to extend to external sources. So go through social media and see what people are talking about to your customer base, and or try to find out like reviews of even your competitors to say, well, look, the AI has analyzed all of our competitors' reviews, and these are the core problems. So, how about we go and fix those problems? Because then we have a differentiation for the marketplace. And that's really how you have to leverage AI to go get data, analyze that data, and use it in impactful ways to go back to solve problems for your customers.
Indeed, because AI is good at pattern recognition. And when you feed enough data about your customers, probably can see way faster and better things that you might miss into your manual research on your customer base. And the second example, I think it's another super smart one because often people will complain, right? Into forums, reviews, commenting on a certain company YouTube channel or social media post. And based on that, indeed, you can differentiate and at the same time use that maybe as a common enemy and build a solution around that and solve that problem better than anyone else. And do you have a go-to tool that you use on a daily basis or you recommend businesses implement to do, for example, this type of research?
Yeah, so I use a lot of different tools, but for anybody who's out there thinking about like where to start or how to start, you can start very easily with a tool like Claude. Anthropic's LLMs, it's similar to ChatGPT, but the difference with Claude is that it will actually go out and scan the internet and do some research and then come back and compile that research and generate reports for you. So, at a very basic level, right? Like, so beginners, people who are just starting, you can go log into Claude and ask it something like, could you scan the internet for competitors in the, say, food services space or whatever space you're in, and find comments on social media that tell me about either my competitors or about problems that they're experiencing. Like, it could be a very simple query that you ask, and it will do it. It will go out and it will provide you with some information. And it's a good way to at least foundationally start the investigation process.
And what I love about Cloud is the fact that it connects as well with your internal tools. Like if you have a, let's say, Google Drive, where you have a lot of data about your customers, or you use Notion as a platform to gather all the data, you can plug those in as well, and you can have a better perspective, not just outside information. And yeah, it's comparing to ChatGPT, for example, that it's probably most popular. I found it a bit buggy when it comes to doing research. Even Gemini from Google seems, at least in my workflows, a bit better when it comes to deep research. But let's talk a bit about custom solutions. Like when, after, let's say, someone is doing their own due diligence and they truly identify that by implementing certain things, they will help their customers better or they'll solve problems faster and better and so on. And the customers demand that. Where should they look for and what to avoid?
Yes. So there's a lot of ways that you can kind of frame how you move forward, right? So you've identified the problem, you understand that it's going to solve whatever the issue is, and you've begun a search for different types of tools that hopefully are going to help you achieve this. I've always suggested that you have to start small. And I'll use a good example, which is for those out there who are familiar with Experian. They're a credit report company. And what Experian did was they built a chatbot. They call it a chatbot. And for all intents and purposes, that's exactly what it is. But what they did was they began training it and using it for only a very specific demographic of customers and a very small segment of customers. They started with something like 8% of very specific calls into their support center. And they did that, and then they got some feedback, and then they made some adjustments. And so then they iterated, and then they expanded it to 34%. And I don't even think they've even rolled it out to 100% yet. They're still kind of slowly building this. A good way to think about this is what, in programming and development, product development, we have what we call an MVP, minimal viable product. And in most cases, if you are an agile company, you have some sort of sprint process where every 2 weeks you're going to iterate on whatever the product is. I make the exact same recommendation for rolling these things out. Like, find a tool, try to build a minimal viable solution for whatever you're trying to solve, and see how it works, and roll it out to a small selection of your customer base. Get their feedback, find out how that is working for them. Is it improving? Track the performance. All of the typical things that you would do with a normal product, you can do the same process with an AI implementation. And then as you grow that, you can make the adjustments needed. You can roll it out to more people, and then you can expand as it makes sense. But also, you can learn from that process. This doesn't really work. This doesn't do what we thought it was going to do. We should try a different tool. We can compare two different tools to do the same test to see which one performs better. All of these kind of testing and iteration processes are essential for rolling out AI. And then on top of all of that, you really have to start to find individuals within your company that are going to manage this process. I've simplified it down to even you've got product managers who design and kind of manage the product iterations. Well, have an AI product manager, like have an AI project manager. Just manage the project in terms of how you're going to roll this out, when you're going to roll it out. I see another big challenge out there, which is because of that fear of missing out, because of the desire to roll something out as fast as possible. They're buying an AI solution, they're doing a couple of quick things, and then they're rolling it out, writing press releases. And in a lot of cases, they're probably rolling it out way too early, and it's not going to be as effective. So don't fear that you're going to be missing out on something. Get it right and do slow iterations and put somebody in charge of the project so that it can be successful.
Absolutely, because often if you don't have the experience and the means to do it by yourself, if you don't have that outside perspective or the expert in this AI space to help you implement and oversee the project, yeah, they might encounter that roadblock. On that note, can you please explain to us how do you help companies to implement AI solutions?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I label myself an AI strategist, the simplest way to explain it. But I spend a lot of time working with a ton of different types of organizations, going through pretty much the exact same premises that we've been talking about. So I have a lot of different frameworks. So, for example, one of my frameworks is customer first, technology last, AI maybe. And the maybe is actually a framework for you to walk through and think about, is this the right solution for us? I have workshops that I will come in and sit down with teams that we can do full day strategy sessions. We can find exactly what you want to build. I was talking about MVP, minimal viable product, but I also have this tool called MVBO, minimal valuable business outcome. And that process is basically to help you identify what is the simplest thing that we could solve that is going to generate the most value for your organization. And then let's see if we can apply AI to that one thing. And so there's a lot of these. I've got an assessment, like an AI readiness assessment. Where is your data within the organization? Is your data siloed? What are your skills? Do you have people who are familiar with AI? So we go through this kind of assessment process to determine if you are even ready to proceed with AI. And so all of these different types of tools and frameworks, I will sit down with companies and help them go through. I also do a lot of work with startups. So if you're a small company and you're just starting and you want to figure out how to implement AI or you have questions, we'll do that as well. But yeah, a lot of it is just walking through the steps, asking the right questions, asking tough questions, and working with you to figure out what the solution is, what the right solution is, and then building a 90-day forecast or 90-day strategy plan so that you can execute on it.
Nice. And what I have to ask you here, it's about the fact that someone came to you and they thought that they have a clear picture of the potential AI solution they need. But you running them through the assessments and through your frameworks, you realize that they realize that, oh, actually, they didn't need that, but something totally different. And if you can share some example on that.
Yeah, it happens all the time. It happens a lot. And that's great. There are going to be individuals who have an idea, who want to execute that idea, and I can take them through any number of questions and frameworks and processes, and they will leave still wanting to do that idea. Great. Go ahead and do it. That's what you want to do. Go ahead and do it. But on the flip side, there have been plenty of people who have come in with an idea. And then when you sit down with them and you go through the same strategy sessions, they realize that it's not necessarily the right idea or that they will leave with something better. I'm big on a process or a mindset called 10x thinking, which is how can we take what you want to do and make it even better? How can I challenge you in a way to rethink this, but still walk away with exactly what you want to accomplish? And I think a lot of people just want to build something cool and interesting. That comes with a certain style of science. There is a lot of science to building successful projects. We go back to Uber as an example. A lot of people feel like, well, Uber just materialized overnight and it completely disrupted the entire taxi service. No, they did a lot of research. They understood what the consumer problem was. They went directly to solve that consumer problem. And then they figured out a couple of different ways and technologies to be able to do that. That didn't happen overnight. It wasn't lightning in a bottle. There was a lot of science and research behind the scenes in the process of building Uber. And I think a lot of people just want instant success. They think they've got an idea, they want to go build that idea, and they believe that idea is going to be hugely successful the next day.
Great advice, Chris. And I'd like to pivot a bit to careers because often, especially those young individuals that get into the tech world or they start their own path into finding something to do long term, they see the hype that we discussed about the fear of missing out and so on. And I'd like to ask you, who is this for? Who should walk this path? Or how they should identify if this is for them?
Yeah. So career is interesting because, again, what we have seen is a whole bunch of people who have woken up overnight and have instantly become AI experts. And again, it's flooded out there where I would say definitely 3 years ago, if you looked at LinkedIn, no one had AI in their profile. Very few people had AI in their profile. Now, pretty much everybody I look at has some form of AI this or AI that in their profile. And so we do have to kind of look at where we're at today, where we're going in the next several years, and review history and how history has will help us define where we are heading. The first question is AI going to go anywhere? And the answer is no. AI is here. It's not going to go anywhere. It's going to be around, but our emphasis on that AI is going to decline and it's going to be replaced by some other technology. There's some potential thoughts about what that might be, but ultimately, AI as a tool is going to be around for a long time moving forward. But so is like HTML for website development. And you don't see a lot of people who say HTML experts in their profile, right? And so if you said, I'd really like to get into AI, great. Like go and do it. Take some courses, learn about AI. You can get a degree in AI now. There's plenty of free courses that are out there, plenty of YouTube videos out there. You could even log into your favorite chat program, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude, as we've been talking about, and say, I would like to learn how to use AI, provide me with a course and information, and it will provide you with the information so you can learn more about AI. Like it's going to teach you, which is great. But then you've got to start to think about longer term types of strategies for your career. We see that AI is starting to eliminate jobs. We see that there's a lot of areas that are going to eventually become irrelevant. We're going to automate out of a lot of different types of functions. And so things like managing AI is a valid kind of next step. Prompt engineering, which is basically being able to create word combinations in a way to get optimal output from AI. We see that kind of evolving. Again, somewhere along the lines, it's not going to be a focus on AI anymore. And I'll give you a comparison. If somebody was to ask me today, should I go into artificial intelligence or should I go into software development? There's a challenging question because AI is becoming more capable of writing software, but you need software developers to write AI, you know? And so, will we always need software engineers moving forward into the future? Potentially, because we're always going to need somebody to develop whatever the next technology is. So, the core understanding of software development, of object oriented languages and things like that may not change much because again we have to program the AI is not going to be able to program itself, although theoretically Potentially could. But then we get into some ethical debates about that. Other areas, like think about cybersecurity. Cybersecurity isn't going anywhere anytime soon. That is a huge degree. My son asked me, like, what should I go into, AI or cybersecurity? I told him go into cybersecurity because AI will power cybersecurity, but cybersecurity analysts and people who are developing that role is not going away anytime soon. And so again, I share some of this because I think what people have to do is they have to reflect more on, oh, AI is the thing today. So I need to get into AI because it's going to be around. But I think what you really have to do is look at, well, what is the core technology? Data. I would say that data scientist is more valuable today than an AI expert, right? And so get into data because there's always going to be data, and AI's got to, data is the fuel for AI. So these are the questions you've got to ask, and then you can kind of sort through that to find roles that are better aligned to what you want to accomplish.
I love this example, and especially the data part, because I think a couple of weeks ago or 1 month or something ago, there was a entire, I don't know, a lot of articles written about a certain thing. Like I think Meta poached data scientists from OpenAI or the other way around. And because they are so in demand, there's so few of them that are actually good that they throw at them like a lot of money just to change camps. And not to mention cybersecurity. We live in a world, it's so hard to know what's real and what's not. And like those people that, let's say, ethics are not their driven value, they are trying to do a lot of unorthodox things to everyone that is like biting the dust. And yeah, how do you protect yourself like in that world in which we kind of touched it at the beginning, but as a user, like we are online every single day, either on laptops or phone devices and so on. Do you have a go-to way of thinking around it, like how to challenge what you see? Or
Yeah. I just quickly on the data science and poaching, just to give you perspective, AI engineers are getting salaries around 500, $600,000 annually for US. And there are poaching happening for data scientists with salaries up to several $1 million annually. And I saw a job posting at Netflix that was $3 million annual salary for a data scientist. And so it just shows you, if you just compare AI engineer versus data scientist, the data scientists are drastically making more money. So, yeah, something to think about. As far as cybersecurity and what to be aware of, we're always online. We've always are being challenged by misinformation, and now with AI video creation, we've got fake videos that are starting to materialize. We can fake people's voices. There's been events now that we've heard where people are using people's kids, your children's voices, and then having them call and claiming that they've been abducted and that they've got to be pay a ransom to be released. And so these people are all using AI tools to really do some crazy stuff. And unfortunately, the same advice that I gave 10 years ago is the same advice that I still give today. You have to get very familiar with all of these different types of frauds and processes and be able to identify them pretty quickly. And I recognize that that's hard, but it's almost, if I was to hold up a piece of fruit right now and it's, here's an apple, here's a banana, you're going to be able to say, oh yeah, that's an apple, that's a banana. You need to get to a point where when you see some sort of scam or some sort of fraudulent email or some sort of whatever it is, your first question has to be, oh, this is fake. That has to be your default response. I received an email this morning, like just about 10 minutes before we started to record, and it was from somebody claiming that they had a job for me. And as I was looking through the email, uh, my first instinct was, this isn't true, right? This is a scam. Now, I can't tell you if it is or if it isn't. I don't know. But the instinct has to be fraudulent first and then do a little research to figure out if it is or not. And you got to pick up on the cues. You got to be able to say banana or apple and look at an email and instantly say that's fake or that's real. And it's going to get harder to be able to distinguish that, but you've got to train yourself and recognize those elements just so you can protect yourself.
Absolutely, because often, yeah, email messages on your phone, even like as you mentioned, calling, like it's insane that my parents got called a couple of weeks ago by someone that pretended to be me on WhatsApp. And obviously, because my voice is out there on the podcast, it's so easy to replicate. But I was intrigued, like how they find who my parents are, probably social media. Yeah, it's crazy. But I already luckily informed them that whenever I call them to ask for money or stuff that I don't usually do not believe it. Even if I say that I end up in an accident or whatever, like dramatic thing, do not believe it at the first glance. And yeah, it's a bit scary, and especially for people that are not tech savvy or obviously they have some sort of emotion to the person that are trying to the bad behaviors, the bad people are trying to impersonate. And I see ads as well with celebrities that are promoting things that I know them, I follow them, I'm sure they don't promote such things. And then if you check, they're like, oh, I have to report another ad that was pretending to be me and selling some crypto scheme or whatever. Yeah, it's crazy world that we're living in, but luckily there are solutions to protect yourself, to do your due diligence. And as you mentioned, like go from the premise that it's false, it's a scam, and then you do your own research to see if that's true or not. And speaking of ethics, you teach at university AI ethics at university. Can you share a few topics that you cover so people are actually walking the right path into this world?
Yeah, ethics in artificial intelligence is really interesting because it's, you mentioned it earlier. And what I think a lot of people fail to understand or may not really put it into this perspective, but AI is really nothing more than pattern matching. Like that's really all it is. And so what we mean by this is that even in say ChatGPT or your large language models, if you ask it a question, first off, it doesn't even know what the question is. It has no basic foundational understanding of what you have asked. All it knows is that you put a sequence of words together and it is going to look at those words and then attempt to match those words with a response. And that response is just another set of words that it's going to match against. And so if you realize that it doesn't have a basic understanding of context, of language, of word usage, and it's all just combination, the same principles actually apply to a lot of other areas. If we think about self driving cars, for example, self driving cars is just a way to match a sequence of events in a precise order. Turn left, coming up, I've got a map, turn left. Like that's a sequence that's matching left to left. So then we get into the ethics of a car. And if we just think about ethics as a human, what we are basically attempting to do is train a computer, train a system to think in a same way as we might think. And driving cars is there's a whole process and there's a lot of different similar scenarios where either it's like a trolley train or a train or we can apply it to a car, but basically, let's put this in perspective. The car is driving forward and it approaches an intersection. And in the intersection, there is a puppy dog. What do I do? You and I might instantly think I'm either going to put on the brakes, right? That's we're going to try to stop before we hit the dog. Then we add a more complex scenario. We say the brakes are out, or we can't stop in time because we're traveling too fast. And by the time we see the dog, what should we do? And again, as you're listening to this, we can all start to theoretically come up with a solution. I'll swerve left. or I'll swerve right. Well, as we make this more complex, we start to say, well, on the right is a light pole. And if I hit the light pole, I potentially injure myself. Or I can say, you know what? Instead of a light pole, there is a small young child to the right. And there's the puppy dog in the center. There's the young child to the right. Now, what do I do? Well, I'm going to swerve to the left. Okay, well, now there's an elderly woman on the left. Now I've got, if I go left, I hit an elderly woman. If I go straight, I hit the puppy dog. If I go right, I hit the small child. What do I do? Now,
It's quite
each one of,
simple now that
yeah,
yeah.
it's not that simple, but each one of us can start to rationalize and theorize and philosophize on what we might do. Somebody might say, "Well, hit the dog because a dog's life is not as important as the human life." Right? But then if you replace the dog with another person, a man, like, well, do you hit the elderly? Do you hit the man or do you hit the young person? Somebody might say, well, hit the elderly woman because the young person still has their whole life in front of them. Like, so there's all of these very complex human, concepts that you have to now train a system, a machine to think through and to make decisions on. And the ethics of that, the moral dilemmas of that are challenging enough for us, let alone to have a computer make those decisions for us. And if we put this into other perspectives, like doctors, what is the ethics behind treating patients with AI? Or maybe you have a doctor that doesn't have the answer and it asks AI for the answer. Like, is that ethical? What if we had AI in courts? Where right now we're seeing a lot of attorneys that are using AI to fill out court documents only to find out that AI has fabricated the information. And now the attorneys are being held liable for false information in courts. But we're also not too far away from having a judge be an AI. And is that better or worse? Does the bias and impartiality of whatever the court decision is get removed because now you have an AI who's there who is supposedly unbiased? So there are a lot of really interesting and challenging ethical conversations that we are faced with right now that is only growing on a daily basis.
I bet that your students love your classes because just sharing these examples put things into perspective to truly understand the modern challenges that we currently face as humanity. Because training these models in a way will obviously provide an answer in that biased way. And you can go as well, like looking at the big players in the field, like if the company is based in US, will be biased to that narrative. If it's based in China, will be biased, and so on and so forth. But indeed, to more complex applications like the one that you mentioned, it's even more interesting and complex in the same time. So it will be quite fascinating to see what's about to come.
I'll add to that. There's also the individual, we go back to the customer, consumer, participant in this conversation. If you were being charged with murder and your life was on the line, would you want an AI to be the judge? Or would you want a real person who potentially has empathy and understanding of your situation? Each of us are going to have to answer that question because those are the types of solutions that are being researched right now.
Yeah, indeed. And especially in some countries, like, for example, when I traveled last time to Singapore, like everything, for example, they're very advanced and they have cameras everywhere. And even by that, like if camera surveillance system, it's AI driven and make decisions and so on without any emotional attachment, even probably like crossing the street illegally, but you while crossing that street, maybe you avoid something that can, I don't know, put in danger your life or you save someone else. But the camera system detect that you crossed illegally and they actually punish you or whatever. Just a stupid example. But I'm thinking like, yeah, the world that we are heading to is both interesting and scary. But I think that's the beauty of life.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think there's still a wide gap between where we are today and obviously perfecting this technology. And on some level, I've been around AI for a long time and I find it fascinating, but I also see some real concerns. The current implementation of AI, the way consumers are using AI, there are some legitimate concerns that will impact our future. And so there, you're right. There's some really fun and exciting elements to it, and definitely some very scary elements.
Yeah, definitely. And if those listening want to learn more about your work, working with you, where they can contact you.
Yeah, everybody can reach out to me on my website. So that's chrishood.com, CHRISHOOD.com. And there you can find any way you want to engage with me. If you want me to help you in some way, reach out. You can find my social media profiles. You can follow me, my blogs, my podcast. Everything is right there, chrishood.com.
And make sure to check the links down below because Chris' links will be there. And I want to conclude with one final question for you. Let's travel back in time around 10 years ago. What you were doing and what advice you gave to your younger self, knowing already what you know right now.
Yeah. If I knew what I knew 10 years ago today, I probably would have written a few more books. And I would have written those books based on some of the premises that I talk about today and some of the philosophies. So things like this is a big one, but autonomous AI, which doesn't exist. There is no autonomous AI. There is no such thing as autonomy in AI. And yet it's an overly marketed, overly hyped concept that everybody talks about. And I would have probably written a book 10 years ago as to why there is no autonomous AI and the rationales behind that, and built a framework for judging it. And hopefully then we would have prevented 10 years worth of marketing hype on something as simple as autonomy and AI. So things like that, I would have liked to have stopped the genie from getting out of the bottle per se and tried to close that box sooner than today. I could say things like, here's the lottery numbers of the future, but I think I would have tried to solve some of the problems that we're faced with right now before they happened.
Chris, I just wish that there are more people in this space out there that are looking through the type of lenses that they're looking. Because I think we should always start with ethical approach to technology, and rather than overhype certain things like the one that you mentioned, autonomous AI, rather focus on helping others, and everything else will follow through afterwards.
Yeah. Yep.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And to anyone listening, thank you so much for tuning in. And make sure to follow Chris and his work because you are up for a treat. Thank you so much again. And until next time, pura vida.